here.
Because I live in Detroit, I was able to get tuition-free
Good morning,
college
everybody,
through the
and
Detroit
welcome
Promise.
to another
I
episode
feel
of the Week
very
That Was.
fortunate working with the Detroit Promise. They were able to afford me so many opportunities. I'm currently studying media production and journalism at University of Michigan Dearborn. I'm looking to take my talents further into the production industry, short films. I love working with people here, and this is where I want to be. And that's why I'm Detroit for life.
Hi, I'm Eric Sabri, your Wayne County Treasurer. If you're living in the home of a deceased family member and you're facing property tax foreclosure, the probate process can be helpful to you. If you file a probate petition and notify our office, the foreclosure proceedings will be halted during the probate process. Contact us at 313-224-5990 or email us at taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Week That Was. I'm so glad that first commercial is back. That dude's a baller. This is Saeed Khan, and it has been certainly a very busy week. As some of you probably are still reeling from yesterday, the shock news of the week, 12-year-old Floridian Bruhat Soma, an Indian American, winning the 96th annual Scripps Spelling Bee. What a shock.
I was just going to say, when has an Indian American not won the spelling bee?
I think it was last year after after the Supreme Court and the Harvard's affirmative action case opened the field back up. Yeah. So, but I'm sure
my
most
hat
of you...
is off. My hat is off to the Indian American parents who push their kids into super spelling, because as somebody who's a natural excellent speller, I think that's a great thing. And for somebody like Lengel, who I am still trying to convince that the plural of attorney general is attorneys general, I'm sure that's a different kind of thing. So
hey, I grew up with immigrant parents who do phonetically everything. We don't
throw me down the stairs, my coat. They would say, right, Lengel?
Actually,
yeah, exactly.
Okay, sorry, Alan, I didn't mean to.
Alan, I think those are immigrants' parents. Is the proper thing, right, Nancy? Yeah. Well, obviously, the big news is how should we spell this? Guilty. Former President Trump was found guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records in furtherance of a crime, election interference being chief among these. A New York jury came back in a day and a half to go ahead and render their decision. I think the speed by which it occurred probably was more of a surprise to some than the actual verdict itself. We are joined in all of this frenzy about talking about spelling bees and collectives and plurals and all. I forgot to go around the horn. We've got our usual troika of attorneys: Steve Fishman, Bill Seikaly, Joel Sklar. We have in the center square today Detroit Free Press investigative columnist ML Elrick. We have labor and community activist Barb Ingalls, veteran journalist Nancy Derringer, and of course, co-founder of Deadline Detroit, Allan Lengel. Now, please speak to us. What do you think about the verdict? Anyone?
Let's hear from the non-lawyers first.
Yeah.
Let's hear from the Gentiles.
Right. Elrick.
Well, I'll try not to go Gentile into that good night. Press room very good at Mackinac Island for the policy conference when the news came down. And let me tell you, there's nothing harder than writing something that's not very interesting than when something really interesting happens. And it was the most significant criminal case decision that I've experienced with other journalists around me since I was in the courtroom when former Macomb County Sheriff Bill Hackel was convicted of rape more than 20 years ago in an Isabella County Circuit Court house. It was, everything kind of stopped. And one of my colleagues was like, well, should we be going out there and getting reaction to this from people here at the Mackinac Policy Conference? And I said, unless you're a juror, I don't give a shit what you think, because all the rest of us have our opinions, but nobody's got any insights. And it was sort of a stop what you're doing moment.
Are you still on Mackinac now, ML?
As you know, the Grand Hotel is one of the most finely appointed hostelries in the country, and I'm in a shabby room here at my house trying to finish my comm. So
okay, so did you drive back last night?
Technically, I started driving home at night, but I got home at about 3:30 in the morning. And the first thing I said when I got home is, that son of a bitch, Allan Lengel, I never should have told him I could do.
I was just going to say, that doesn't look like the Grand Hotel. Well, hats off.
I think the exact room where Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour were in somewhere in time.
Yes, that was before they had black lights.
Okay, Alan.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, when it said there's a verdict back, I thought it has to be a lot of guilties going on there. I think we were all shocked how quick it was. I assume it would go into next week. I assume it would be a kind of a Donnybrook in the jury room, be like arguments, and they'd get a note, we're hung on some counts. Go ahead.
Well,
go ahead, Nancy.
You wanted to hear from all the non-lawyers.
I want to hear from the veteran journalists. Not just
the veteran journalists. Okay, well, okay.
Personally, I would take that as an insult, but Saeed doesn't it doesn't bother him.
All right, I'll tell you what I think. And I mean, I'm torn between being Joel and being Steve. And Steve has been saying all along, get this son of a bitch into a courtroom and we'll see what we saw yet last night. And Joel, on another matter, but he's showing his, on the Michigan football thing, oh, I don't know if we can do it. Blah, blah. So I'm kind of between these two guys. And I decided today in the shower to choose joy. And I think that all of us who have despised Donald Trump for years now are owed at least 24 hours of warm feelings over this. And even though I know that it's not going to sway a single idiot in his base, it could well lead to more violence. I mean, this could have fallouts that none of us are going to like, but at the same time, I feel like justice was done. So that's my take.
Nancy, I believe that joy works better for dishwashing than it does in the shower, just for next time. So,
okay, he stole my line.
Okay.
I don't want to talk about this, Barb. I'll give you but Nancy, could you explain a little further what you mean by when you were in the shower, you chose joy?
I don't know. I was washing my hair, which is always a good feeling, getting that grunge out of there. So, yeah, sorry. So
Steve.
go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
Well, I this is one time in my life that
Barb didn't get a chance to chime in here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Barb.
Okay. I just want to say I have really trained myself to be pessimistic with these things because you get picked up and slammed into the ground over and over again. So while driving down John R. yesterday afternoon and hearing the NPR reporter, and he sounded like he didn't believe it either, say guilty, I really nearly ran into one of those giant bully trucks that populate the road while I was screaming and punching the air and doing the dance. I'm happy. We'll see. I agree. 24 hours is good. We have until about 4 o'clock, and then we got to calm down and get back to work. But it's a good feeling.
Yeah.
All right, Steve.
Okay.
So they went out on Tuesday, and on Wednesday they asked those 4 questions. And probably for the only time in my entire life, I listened to the questions and I started calling friends of mine, and I wound up telling everyone in the gym, he's going to be convicted, and he's going to be convicted quickly. And I actually didn't think it would be yesterday, but I thought for sure it would be by the end of today. The questions that they had, first thing, Steinglass did such a tremendous job of coming in after listening to all that baloney from Blanche, who only talked about Michael Cohen, basically, ignored all the real evidence in the case. And when Steinglass took as long as he took and put all that stuff up there on his PowerPoints or on the bulletin boards or wherever it was, when they asked questions and saying they wanted to hear from David Pecker, anybody that paid attention to this case knows that can only help the prosecutor. Every single thing David Pecker said helped the prosecution. And the second thing about Pecker, there's nothing worse as a defense lawyer to cross-examine what we might refer to as a snitch. You know, he got his deal, he came in, but the problem was, yeah, the guy had a lot of things about him that were weird, but he was still friends with Trump. He said nice things about Trump. It's much more difficult to cross-examine someone who comes in and buries your client and then doesn't show any bias against your client. So as soon as they asked for Pecker's testimony and then for the specific part of Cohn's testimony about the meetings and the phone calls, they were toast. And I wasn't the least bit surprised that it came back quick. Like you guys, I was happy as a clam, no doubt about it. I went crazy. People were calling me, you know, because I don't text, right, with my flip phone. And people have to call me to tell me. And it was a fantastic thing. But I was not the least bit surprised the minute I saw those questions that came from the jury.
Good for you.
But now that Nancy's set the bar, was it happy or was it joy?
I was drinking a glass of Camus at the time I heard it, so I was happy.
I have some reactions on the other side.
Actually, it was a sweet moment when the verdict was read. They say Elrick, who was sitting behind his father, put his arm around his dad, and he leaned in close, and Trump whispered, "I wish this had happened to you." Satisfying to see all the blood-sucking jellyfish who feed off his essence losing their minds.
Today is a truly sad day.
We have convicted a former president of the United States of America.
Complete, utter abomination and disgrace.
Number one, I'm angry, I'm furious, and number two, I'm heartbroken.
I wish there was something to laugh about, but there's not. This is a disgraceful day for the United States.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change.
Could you play that again?
His lawyer has a look on his face, the same look I have when I feel really constipated. And I really got to get to the bathroom soon.
Yeah, his lawyer gave like a 3.5 hour closing, which was nuts and rambling, you know, and I was reading the New York Times, and there may have been a way to win this case. I said, you know, if you were focused and you had, maybe, it just maybe. But the way that they disrespected the jury at the time, again, the scattershot approach as opposed to really focusing on a theme, I don't think there was really a theme. I think was terrible as well. I think that's just there was no theme to Trump's defense. There was nothing to tie everything together.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Steve. No, please go ahead.
No, I think we have to remember, and we've been saying this since this trial began, it's almost impossible to be a lawyer where you don't have control of the case. If the client is insisting on this, that, and the other, and we've said from the beginning, if he would have just allowed them to tell the truth about Stormy Daniels and say, look, okay, yeah, he did it. He had it, whatever they're going to call it, an affair. She would have not even been a witness. There would have been none of that nonsense. And quite frankly, if he weren't such a misogynist, the one lawyer who had experience as a criminal defense lawyer in state court was the lady. And all they had her do was cross-examine Daniels. And then because of him, she winds up shouting and yelling at her, which I guarantee is not the way she normally handles herself. If he really were a normal person and a normal defendant, normal client, the lawyers would have said, here's how we're going to handle it. And the lawyers would have done what they thought was the right thing to do. But like everything else he puts his hands in, it turns to shit. And that's what he did to his own defense.
Yeah, he micromanages.
Bill, this is why I'm choosing joy, to hear opinions like that. Exactly. Because that is
Bill, the jury wanted to go back and rehear the testimony and the evidence regarding the Pecker powwow with Michael.
His name, Jesus, go ahead.
By the way, that was in no way intended to offend the Native American community. The fact that they really were honing in on this. Do you think that the Costello testimony was really what did Trump in, or do you think that the jury had already made up its mind when they heard the testimony? And then we'll hear from Steve.
Yeah, somebody else. Go ahead.
Go.
Things. one on a personal note that I just have to share. I was in the hospital yesterday for a minor procedure, but they had to put me under, and the verdict came in 5 minutes before they carted me off. The doctor was applauding. The nurses were applauding. I was getting up out of the bed, trying to jump up and down. It was pandemonium. And I looked at the doc and I said, I now know you'll do a good job. So we're fine.
Well, I'm glad you're better, and I'm glad you didn't come out of anesthesia for this. But okay.
Yeah. One, I think he was found guilty for a very simple reason. He was guilty. Let's get that down. I happen to agree with everything Steve said on virtually every show that I've been on with him. Juries are incredibly committed to what they do. I am willing to bet that there are 1 or 2 Trump voters on this jury, and it will come out eventually, I think, that there were 1 or 2 Trump voters on this jury who looked at the evidence and said, I wanted to go the other way. I can't help it here. And I think I look forward to that coming out.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
When I was standing in the fire hose of reaction early this morning in bed on my iPad, I saw a chart, and I don't know where it came from because it was on somebody's social media, but it said that there was at least one juror who said that he or she got most or all of their news via Truth Social, which tells me that was the one they were hoping would be the holdout and would hang the jury. And if that's the case, and we still got a verdict in a day and a half. I mean, that's amazing.
I don't know what
Steve,
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. My only comment is that anybody who spends time with Trump, including the jury, hates Trump.
Mm-hmm.
He's a disgusting human being to be around. His presentation is offensive if you're with him. And the jurors hated him in the Jean Carroll case. They hated him in this case. And my belief is the more time you see him and spend with him, the more disgusting and repulsive he becomes, the more human he becomes, and maybe even less than that. And that's my sense. And so anytime he gets before a jury, I expect this result because he's such an asshole. He's so unlikable. He does nothing to help himself. And again, the lawyers have no control over the strategy or the tactics of litigation. He does. And he's just a fucking bull in a tire shop. He's an animal. So,
but if you've tried more than 4 or 5 cases, I've won verdicts with people who the jury didn't like, but the evidence was on my side.
Mm-hmm. Nancy, regarding that juror, I mean, it could be like if you actually are in proximity to your hero, you become disillusioned. Just like the Brad Pitt episode of Growing Pains.
No man is a hero to his valet. That kind of thing. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, Steve.
Well, in answer to what Nancy said about the one juror, you have to keep in mind that Manafort trial. And I've talked about this before on our podcast. The one person who went public told the press that she was a total Trumper. Basically, she got on the jury somehow. She believed that everything was crazy and she was for other MAGA people and this and that and the other. And she said, but then the funniest thing happened. I started listening to the evidence and the evidence was overwhelming, which is I'm sure what happened with this person here. With respect to Costello, I have to believe, and I'd love to hear the other guy's opinions. The only reason that guy was put on the witness stand had to be because of Trump. It had to be. No lawyer would put somebody on the witness stand that's going to get into a shitting match with the judge and offend the heck out of the jurors. It's insane. With respect to the other thing, Saeed, I don't believe jurors have, quote, made up their minds. I absolutely agree with what Bill said. Jurors take their job seriously. They take the instruction seriously. They're human beings, and obviously they have inklings and leanings as time's going on. But I do not believe that they make up their minds until they go in the back and they're told by the judge to begin deliberating. So Costello, the notion, and any of us trial lawyers can say, you're going to put a witness like that, and that's the last witness that the jury hears? I mean, think about that. A guy gets up there, he has to get admonished by the judge. He makes a total ass out of himself, and that's the last person you hear. That doesn't mean that the jurors had already made up their mind. It just meant that the defense presentation was obviously not very much because he didn't advance the ball. If anything, he hurt their case.
That's why I don't roll my eyes on the show, because I don't want you to prejudge me.
The veteran journalist will get you. She'll get you.
I would think some of the jurors would be offended, as the American people should be, about David Pecker's testimony and how he worked with Michael Cohen and how they fabricated stories, and just sort of seeing the inner workings of the Trump campaign and the Trump machinery, where people would just be like, "Oh my gosh, this is just horrific."
It's one thing for that to come out on the news. It's one thing for CNN or NBC or ABC to be talking about that,
right?
In article. It's another thing to be hearing it from the head of the company on the witness stand under oath. Listen, jurors we can't say it enough. Jurors are serious about what they do. I was worried that somebody might have lied to get on, might have been what I call a true Trumper. I assumed that they asked the question, have you ever been to a Trump rally? And if the answer to that was yes, that would have been a disqualifier from my perspective. But short of that, I think that you could have had two Trumpers on and you would have gotten the same result. The evidence seemed to be, from what I can see, I'm always nervous about this because I won't predict what a jury's going to do most of the time unless I'm the one giving the closing, because that's when I can use it.
What Allan said is really interesting. The disgraceful nature of everything, whether it was Pecker and the Inquirer, but just the entire Trump campaign, essentially. You got to keep in mind, Todd Blanche in his closing had the colossal gall, and it had to be with an urging from Trump to say, "Oh, this is normal. This is how every campaign works. Everybody catches and kills. Everybody gets the National Enquirer involved." And as Bill said, jurors are sitting there, and these are regular people, and they are taking things seriously. And how are they going to possibly believe that this is normal? And Steinglass did a great job of dealing with that when he got up on his rebuttal, saying, "No, this is not normal. This is criminal. And that's why we're here." So,
Saeed, do you mind if I play your role for a second? Can I play your role for 1 second? I want to ask Steve this because I don't do criminal trials. Do you think that jurors really do put aside whether or not the defendant testifies?
I think they do. Well, no, I have seen jurors who did not, but I would tell you this: if you're allowed voir dire, which I think you're allowed there, if the lawyer has any idea of what to do and how to behave, the lawyer will be able to make it very certain that the people either go along with that instruction or they're very, very good liars, because I never screwed around with something like that. And I had examples that I used, I won't bore you with, about how people think about the presumption of innocence, how people expect people to testify, blah, blah, blah. If you're allowed voir dire, you should be able to get enough of the jurors, 10 out of 12 at least. Even if there are two that say, when you get in the jury, "Hey, he didn't testify," the other 10 should get all over that person. I get him to do that in the voir dire. I say to him, "Mr. Smith, if Mr. Seikaly comes in and he says that in a jury, what are you going to tell him?" "Well, I'm going to tell him he's full of," whatever way they say it. And you hold him to it. And I really never worried about that if you have voir dire. It's very helpful to be able to talk to them yourself.
So we have another phase coming up. July the 11th is the proposed date for sentencing, unless there might be some changes. What should we expect in the meantime? And I believe New York state law places a maximum sentence of 4 years jail for each count, with a maximum of 20 if it would be served in consecutive terms. Usually for these kinds of cases, probation and/or fines are provided. Just to show you how cutting edge our show is, Trump was competing with us by giving his own press conference or his statement as we were speaking. But I did catch him saying that he's potentially going to be jailed for 137 years, which I think his math is a little bit fuzzy.
I want him to be right. For the first time, I want Trump to be right.
But he also said that this was all due to the fact that a bookkeeper of his placed something in the ledger as a legal expense. So he's clearly spinning this. But what do you think is going to happen on sentencing day? Yeah, Steve.
Well, I can tell you, prior to sentencing day is going to be a day that's very embarrassing for him, and the Times had a really good article about it. When a person is convicted either by plea or trial, you're required to go to the probation department. The probation department prepares a pre-sentence report, which essentially summarizes the person's background, blah, blah, blah. There'll be a section in there that'll say the offense conduct, and that's provided by the government or by the prosecutor's office in this case. But you have to sit there and answer questions. I've done this 1,000 times with clients, and it's not something a guy like this is used to doing. It's another situation where he won't have any control at all. They're going to come in there. He's going to be interviewed the same way as anybody else is interviewed. They're going to make him take a photo, and they may actually make him have a pee test to make sure he's not a drug user.
I'm gonna say that. Are they gonna make him do a drug test?
That's what everybody else has to do. Now I don't know what they're gonna do with him. But the long and the short of it
Steve, can they ring out the depends, or does he actually have to be in the
well, see that. So my point is that he's going to have some embarrassing things happen to him before he ever gets to the trial, to the sentencing stage. One thing I think that the judge is going to have to consider: there's no way, in my view, that a guy who behaves like that and who has called this judge what he called him, including what he called him after the trial, he's going to jail. He's going to get a sentence that includes some custody, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to be necessarily Rikers Island jail. It might not be jail at all. But his movement, his freedom is going to be restricted. And one thing that I heard somebody say on MSNBC that made a little sense to me, the judge may impose a prison sentence. He may say, okay, it's 1 to 4, but you're not going to start serving it until December 15th, or after the election, in other words, because the judge is going to be conscious of the fact that somehow the Republicans are nominating this asshole, and he's not going to want to restrict him from campaigning. So don't be surprised if you see a sentence like that. Every judge has the authority to do that. You can impose a sentence today, and it happens in federal court all the time. It just happened with me 2 weeks ago. The sentence was imposed. It's a short sentence, and he doesn't have to go to September 15th for reasons that don't matter here. So don't be surprised if something like that happens.
I was listening on TV, and they were saying, somebody was saying that that the judge can take into consideration all the violations of the gag order.
Absolutely.
Right, what he's doing now. I mean, in theory, what he just did on CNN, calling out Michael Cohen, is another violation of the gag order. And so, he may be in jail before the 11th if he keeps doing this. If he keeps trying to intimidate jurors, trying to intimidate witnesses, the gag order is still in effect.
Let me tell you guys one other thing. The one thing that we all do, once we've decided we're taking a plea, or if you happen to get convicted at a trial, but really once a guy's charged with something and you're in front of the judge that's going to handle your case, you really make sure that the client behaves herself or himself as best as possible. They don't get involved in anything new. We have a whole shtick that you're going to tell your client, and he doesn't listen anyway. But if they told him that, he's obviously not paying any attention. I've never had a client, 51 years of practice, that publicly, privately, anytime he can, talks about what an asshole the judge is who's going to sentence him. Think about that, people. This is the judge who's going to sentence you, you dumb asshole. You're sitting there and calling, well, look where he comes from and all this kind of stuff.
And Bill, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Joe.
Sorry. No, my thought is that you're going to see emotion from the prosecution about the violations of the gag order, because they're going to get worse as he goes on. He's going to tweet worse. He's already started this hour-and-a-half spiel where he took no questions and was on a extremely conscious rant. I think there's going to be some gag order violations before July 11th, and he may see a little bit of restraint then. Maybe his liberty will be restrained at that point.
We should tell you guys that too. Remember, you don't have to necessarily be locked up in terms of things that a judge can do to you. I have guys who were on home confinement for a year. They could go to work, but they had to be home at 6, and they couldn't get up in the morning and leave until 6 the next morning. I've heard of people who are on home confinement totally. They can't do anything. They're in their house rather than in a jail. That might be something that he might do as well, because Secret Service, blah, blah, blah. It'd be a little easier watching him sitting in his house than it would be having to go to Rikers with these guys.
Yeah, I do think a couple things. One, I do think he's going to go to jail for some period of time. I think it'll be short. I think that he will serve the sentence. I think the judge will be very conscious about the election. I think the sentence will be suspended until after the election, but before the inauguration time. I think he'll give them that and tell them, he gets elected, come back and see me if you're worried about it. There are a couple other things that people keep on asking, and I just thought I'd raise them gratuitously. I got a a private message from Lila, who's one of our regulars. I don't see her on today, but he asked, can he vote in the election, and can he now serve? I want to point out two things. There's the standard for who can run for president are in the Constitution, and only those standards apply. And so he can run for president despite this. However, until just a few years ago, the Republican Party, and until a number of years earlier, the Democratic Party had this, but they changed it. They had a rule that said their candidate could not have been convicted of a felony. They changed that just a couple of years ago. So he will still be able to run as a Republican, even with a felony conviction. In terms of his voting, Florida, where he's a resident, has some of the strictest requirements. They generally can't vote. However, they defer when you're convicted in another state to the law of that state. He's convicted in New York. New York has a law that says you can't vote if you're convicted of a felony and haven't served your sentence. After you've served your sentence, even if it's parole, you can vote. By the way, Trump railed upon people for the Florida exception, and what's his name? The billionaire Mike Bloomberg came in and paid off a bunch of fines because that's one of the requirements in the Florida law. You have to have all your fines gone, et cetera, et cetera. He paid a bunch of, and Trump ripped him a new one, said he was guilty of fraud and election interference, should be thrown in jail. And he railed upon Cuomo for signing the law that allowed convicted felons to vote after they served their sentence in New York.
What,
Steve?
One more thing. Alex asked in a question there whether or not the judge can ban him from using social media or ban him from making comments. A judge can, yeah, there it is, making public statements or social media. A judge can ban people from doing all kinds of things, but this judge has shown, it seems to me, and I think he's absolutely correct, he's tried to walk the fine line between taking people's First Amendment rights away from them, which would be to speak and use social media, et cetera. And he's tried to define it as you can do it, and you can talk about me, but you can't talk about my family or the prosecutors, blah, 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 blah. So the answer to the question is yes, he could do it, but no, he has not done it. And I don't believe that he will do anything more than what he's already done. And like Bill said, if the government brings him in and tries to get him to do something because he's violating the gag order, that's a separate thing. But I don't think this judge will ever say that you can't talk at all, because it's just too many First Amendment problems with that.
Yeah, though interestingly, Steve,
Mike,
when you're convicted of a felony, you do get limited other rights. I mean, he could suspend him from speaking on social media. You're right; it's a First Amendment right. But if it's a punishment of the felony conviction, I think the judge could do it. I agree with Steve; he probably won't, but he has the power to do this, and I'm not so sure he shouldn't.
Hey, Saeed,
Michael,
can we take a break here?
Let's take a break, sure.
All right.
Without Project Clean Slate, there is no telling where I would be right now.
It gave him back his life, because once he got the felony, it seemed like life was over.
Being unemployed, being depressed, being a burden. Project Clean Slate helped wipe those things away. I can't say thank you enough. I am now able to work for a reputable airline. Detroit had my back, all because I live in Detroit.
Fellas, I'm new in town, and I've been here a couple times. I absolutely love your place, man. But I've got to ask you, if you can, I've heard that you're going to be shutting this place down.
I'm not proud of it, brother, but we're behind our property taxes. And the county is all over us, man. I'm even afraid to even give them a call.
Well, we can't let it go, brother. I mean, we can't give up. There's got to be a GoFundMe campaign that we can run, even pass the plate. Is there a forgiveness program or something that's out there?
Well, unfortunately, that's only for the big guys. No, actually, Wayne County has payment plans for everyone.
Are you for real?
Yes, it's a well-designed program. We want to help you save your business.
That's what I'm talking about.
I'm Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri. If you have delinquent taxes on your home or business, contact our office, 313-224-5990, or visit our website, treasurer.waynecounty.com. We're here to help. Got it.
I'm sorry.
You know, I wonder if for the first commercial, I wonder if in that first commercial we'll see Trump there, and given the fact that he could work for his now defunct Trump heir.
Commercial.
So,
I was
so let's see. By the way, Michael, one of our longtime viewers, wrote as far as I think his suggestion for Trump's sentence: Mar-a-Lago, no air conditioning. I think that's an 8th Amendment violation for cruel and unusual punishment for anyone who's been in Florida for that long. But I want to.
I've heard that line. I heard that line in connection with him being detained in his place in New York, but it was the other way around: cruel and unusual punishment to his wife and child.
That would be so. But he could go into one of those classified rooms that's also up there. But I want to follow up on the questions that Layla asked you, Bill, with a couple of more questions. And by the way, those of you who are vocational Gentiles, please chime in as well. That in practical terms,
Yes,
usually a convicted felon can't be in the same presence as POTUS. How are they going to be on the same debate stage? And the other, which is related to the hypothetical that if Trump were to be elected, he's going to be what, a GS-18, the highest government level, quote unquote, employee, and he would be getting full security clearance. How is that even possible? And would that be then a claim that could be made in a lawsuit to be filed to try to invalidate his election?
Well, I checked on the security clearance issue because that was great interest to me. The answer is an elected president does not go through security clearance. He gets it by his office.
Wow.
So he does not go through anybody who's ever had clearance. I had some low-level clearance for a while for a case I was on. Anybody who's ever been through clearance knows you got to fill out a long form. FBI comes out and interviews people if you're high enough. I've gotten interviewed in connection with a couple of federal judge candidates. And you go through this long process. The president and the vice president do not. They get it automatically because of their position.
Okay.
Now, interesting. I mean, I think the interesting stuff is in New York, you can't hold a real estate license. You cannot hold a liquor license if you're a convicted felon. Try that one.
Well, Trump famously doesn't drink.
Business license, didn't he?
He couldn't be a barber either, but I don't think that's it.
Well, you know, historically, barbers used to be in the same guild as surgeons, not as doctors. So, anyways, but mentioning the classified documents case, Judge Eileen Cannon has rejected the prosecution's request for a gag order in that case. It seems as though she is really slow walking this case through and doing all of the defendant's bidding. Do you think that this case will cause her to change her mind, or do you think she's going to double down on protecting Trump?
Anybody read the order?
No.
I read the order. It was on, you might call them technical grounds. It's without prejudice. Everybody who's practiced in federal court knows that there are very serious rules about meet and confer before you bring an issue before the judge. She denied this because the prosecution fundamentally didn't take that seriously, according to her. Now, I'll tell you, I've had at least half a dozen cases in which judges saw that the two sides simply could not get along and relaxed the meet and confer requirements, because you said yes, they said no, you said black, they said white. But that's why she denied it, and it was without prejudice. I have no idea what this woman's going to do. I can't figure out if it's because she's such an ardent Trump supporter, or if the fact that she's a new judge. By the way, being a new federal judge, tough. It is hard. She was not a state judge, was she? I don't think she was a state judge before she got appointed. Being a judge in the federal system is not easy work. And my guess is the woman just is way out of her league.
Yeah, that's giving her too much credit.
Bill, Yeah, Bill. By the way, I'm thinking about maybe crowdfunding for you, just so that you have other stuff to read. I see that Mad Magazine is available as an online subscription.
I think that's giving her too much credit to say that it's because she's inexperienced. First thing, as we know, federal judges are surrounded by really competent people. They have career law clerks. They have other law clerks. I think she's quite frankly just doing whatever she can to help him. And in her view, and in anybody's view, she's just she's already succeeded. She's going to delay the trial. That case is a lock to me. It's an open and shut case. It's even more open and shut than the Georgia case, or certainly more than the one we just had finished. And I just think she's bound and determined to make sure that it doesn't go to trial before the election. The thing you have to keep in mind, though, assuming that the world doesn't go crazy and the guy doesn't win the election, at some point in time, he's going to be in trial in Washington, D.C., unless the Supreme Court loses their mind and said he's completely immune. And at some point in time, he's going to be in trial down in Florida. And at some point in time, he's going to be in trial in Georgia, whether it's Fannie Willis or somebody else or whatever. So this guy, assuming he doesn't win the election, he's got a decent chance of spending the next 3 or 4 years just being in court all the time, and or spending it locked up, which takes him into his
joy.
Which will get joy and pain. The joy will be yours, and the pain will be his, as Frankie Beverly would say. But anyway, that's the thing that you got to keep in mind. These cases aren't going away. It's just a matter of whether or not he wins. And if he doesn't win, he's just another defendant. Right.
Isn't there a comic note to the constant complaining about the temperature in the courtroom in New York? I mean, all I could think about was my departed father, who liked to keep our house at 68 degrees, which caused my friends to refer to our house as the meat locker. And if anybody complained about it, it would be just put on a sweater. Every time Eric brings that up, Eric Trump brings that up, I just want to yell at him, put on a sweater. But
I can tell you a really quick story. Recorder's Court back in the 70s, I'm trying a case, and John Patrick O'Brien was the guy who liked the temperature at 66 or 7, and it was always freezing in there, and the jurors would sit like this, and they wouldn't say anything. My client came in a winter coat every day, sat in a winter coat, and we tried the case, and the jurors found him not guilty. And when they came out, they wanted to know why weren't they allowed to wear winter coats too. I said, if the defendant can do it, you guys can do it. He wore a winter coat for 8 days of trial.
Oh God.
He should have gone down to Dietrich Furs, which was right down the street over there in the news center. So all of this cynicism about the systems. A new Michigan poll shows that a quarter of Michigan voters aren't exactly sold on democracy, and their views about the education and the economy of the country and of the state are pretty much about that level of doleful. How do you think that's going to go ahead and play out in the election? I mean, and plus, not the least of which, the idea that a quarter of those polled think that something other than democracy is somehow okay.
I want to hear from Elrick.
Elrick. Come on, you're working on your column. Have you been paying attention here? We know what you're doing there.
Right.
I know that Charlie LaDuff will be Schmuck of the Week. That's what I've been.
All right, you got it.
They're recently exonerated, I guess. Well, maybe not exonerated. So my column this week is actually about a survey that the Michigan, that the Detroit Regional Chamber did on our feeling in Michigan that we have lost confidence in democracy. The number 2 reason, and these reasons were volunteered by the people who were polled, is corrupt politicians. 10.1% of the people surveyed on their own came up with corrupt politicians as the biggest reason that they have lost confidence in our democracy. Number 1 in the poll with 10.4% was Republicans and Democrats, which I think probably there's a lot of crossover there with corrupt politicians. Yet we were up at this policy conference for 3 or 4 days with panels about solving everything you can think of, but nobody wanted to talk about trying to increase transparency in government, increasing accountability in government, giving the Secretary of State and the AG the tools they need to find out what people are really doing with donations, to bring them to heel when they refuse to answer their queries, and basically to find a way to at least connect us to politicians with these nonprofits, these federal 501c4s, these so-called social welfare funds, where the only people who seem to benefit from them are the people who are collecting the checks. In fact, in my column, I'm going to talk about how Lee Chatfield, the disgraced former Speaker of the House, apparently used money that was supposed to improve life for families in Michigan to help pay for a trip his family took to Universal theme park in Orlando, Florida.
It improved his family's life. So there
Yeah,
you go.
exactly. And of course, I guess if those funds had helped support Ron DeSantis and he'd been elected president, all our lives would be better. But it turns out he's still spending most of his time looking for lifts, which I wouldn't, because I'd want to keep my head down, because when Trump 2 gets there, DeSantis may be high on the list of people he's going to take out once we shred the Constitution.
Huh.
But the problem is, we're talking about how we can make government better, but I think democracy is people, and I think government is people, and we're not doing very much to make sure that we get good people in government, and when we get bad people in government, we find out who the hell they are, and figure out a way to get the hell of them out there, so that Steve can have some more clients.
Well, Michael, you've written a number of columns in the last 3 months about the difficulty of getting information from any number of different places. What, other than, is there something structural that can be done about it, or it's just a matter of getting better people? Which is it? Is there a way that structure could change?
So I've talked to some people who said, well, referenda really help, when the people get together. And I think that's true, except we did have a big referendum to bring more transparency with financial disclosure, and the legislature then went and took it and made the most watered down version of it they possibly could. And here's what bothers me with that. I love the fact that we can have these sorts of things where the people speak directly, but in a representative form of government, we kind of send them there to do our bidding. We shouldn't have to send them there and say, oh, by the way, if you assholes didn't figure it out, here's a referendum. And we had to get 500,000 signatures to get it on there. And then we had to give you 2 years to do something about it. No. They know what we want. This is how bad it's gotten with elected officials and public officials. It is now easier to get an on-the-record comment from Steve Fishman than it is from somebody in politics. I mean, this is incredible. It used to be that elected officials understood that they had an obligation to answer questions, and that when they were asked questions by members of the media, that we were doing it as representatives of the public. But now they hide. And Steve is a ferocious advocate, and he often told reporters, come see the case for yourself and beat it. Now I call Steve for a quote because I can't get elected officials. He used to send me press releases every 5 minutes to say something. I mean, the world's topsy-turvy, man.
It is.
And by the way, Steve, Beat It was also a song by Michael Jackson in the 80s. So,
but not a Motown recording artist, so he will not quote them.
Bill or Nancy, whoever wants to go.
You may do Tamla too. I don't know. Steve, do you do Tamla quotes?
Of course. Are you kidding? The best one I ever gave to you guys was from a tune, a Temptation song that only people who grew up with me would know. They were asking me something about there was more evidence on a certain case. What do you think about it? I said, well, as the Temptations once said, the further you look, the less you see. And only the brothers that grew up with me knew what that song was.
That's a great line.
Wow.
It sounds like a Yogi Berra. Sounds like a Yogi Berra line.
I just want to say everything that ML just said is absolutely correct. But he's describing a very complicated problem with a root system that would rival that UP fungus that goes from Wisconsin to wherever. I mean, all of this is complicated by the fading of local media, the hollowing out of newspapers. My old buddy Ron French had a story last week about the number of ghost newspapers that are proliferating around Michigan now, which are basically just websites or very thin editions with one staffer and who's probably in sports, and some exhausted editor in a distant city writing, turning press releases into copy. It's also the rise of the partisan media. When I saw the stuff about higher education, they've lost faith in higher education. Part of that is because of the ridiculous cost of higher education, which people increasingly feel doesn't pay off for them in the long run, although it still does. But it's also this constant drumbeat that you hear in the partisan media about how colleges and universities are woke factories that are going to turn your kids into not into critical thinkers, but zombies. To bounce back to what you were saying, Elrick, about referenda, all the term limits constitutional amendment has done in Michigan is guarantee a supply of bad legislators. I mean, it's almost like we said, we don't like these legislators, so we need a special tool to get rid of them, thereby guaranteeing a more or less constantly renewing supply of bad legislators. So, I mean, and that's only just a little bit of it. I read that whole poll and I was crestfallen, but this is, but I chose joy anyway. But Nancy, go ahead.
But Nancy, that's true. I mean, there are math departments at many universities that are abolishing the equal sign in favor of a wavy line, as long as you're close. So, right. Bill.
Yeah, I want to push back just a little bit on my friend ML. And I want to use a quote from one of my favorite cartoon characters, Pogo, who said, "We have met the enemy and he is us." We can talk all we want about bad legislators. We voted for them. We can, I think there's a million problems. I think the biggest problem politically that we have is that I'm going to come to that, Alex. The biggest problem that we have now is that the gerrymandering of the legislative seats is ridiculous. Now we're trying to work on that in Michigan, but we need to do something about gerrymandering because we end up with all these partisans. But we need to do something. We are the people who are putting these people in office.
Yeah.
I think that the reason that democracy is in decline, not just in this country, but all over the world. I mean, look what's going on in Israel. Look what, we've got, I want to address Alex's issues. We got 2 Supreme Court justices that by any standards, anywhere, would have been recused from a case that they're about to hear. And they take the position, no, we get to decide and we're not going to recuse ourselves. Those kind of structural problems and our inability as individuals to realize that we must try to influence them, I think got us to where we are. I don't know that democracy can succeed. If Trump gets elected, I think the questions, I think it's...
Yeah.
No. So a couple of local things I thought that we could talk about before we go to our next segment. Mayor Mike Duggan looking to endorse Mary Waters in Michigan 13, saying, quote, regarding Shri Thanedar, the incumbent right now in Michigan 13, that he's not helping. Do you think this will be a major boost for the Mary Waters campaign? We talked about this last week, and it didn't seem as though she had much funding.
Elrick.
What was the oh, yeah, Elrick.
Yeah.
I think Duggan is jealous of Shri's hair. This is a hate endorsement.
I think this is a move to try and help him when he runs for governor.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that Hackel has also revealed that he's interested. I think that's going to make the race.
Isn't Mark Hackel always saying that? Isn't he always saying that?
No,
I mean, he's always interested in the
some
next
of us
thing.
may remember when Hackel's father was suggested as a possible lieutenant governor candidate when
Till he raped the house rape, till he raped the maid.
Yeah. Well, she was.
You guys are pretty
staffer at the Michigan Sheriff's Association conference.
Exactly.
When you're going to assault somebody, why not do it in a hotel full of cops? But, Darlene,
nothing like Trump does.
but other sheriffs might have. But I think Bill's right. A lot of people looked at this and said, well, this is a way for Duggan to shore up some of his support in Detroit. And that was my initial reaction too. And I definitely think that's probably part of the arithmetic. But the more I thought about it, I heard Duggan speak from the stage, and he's been saying this consistently since he became mayor, that one of the keys to Detroit's turnaround is good relations between the mayor and city council. So I think it's entirely possible that this endorsement has nothing to do with Congress, has nothing to do with governor, but it has everything to do with Mike Duggan wanting to go from his spot on the 11th floor up to city council on the 13th floor and have everybody do what they've been doing his whole time, which is, yes, sir, whatever you want, sir. When's the ceremony, sir? Where can I stand for the photo op, sir? Can I get one of those silver shovels, sir? I mean, the
two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah, when we talk about democracy, one of the things that undermines my faith in democracy is the checks and balances in places like Detroit City Hall are non-existent.
Well, Michael, I mean, it's not that everybody gets the chance to be propositioned by an underage-looking woman from Kazakhstan, but hey, that's a whole different ball game. That was a cue to you, Alan.
You added an extra syllable in there, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah. But there is one item that we didn't actually have on the agenda, but I think it's regarding corruption. The news coming out regarding the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy, the potential of at least $40 million that seems to be unaccounted for, but it may be in the, what is that, 9 figures, around 137 million.
What?
The CFO? Yeah, the CFO. Well, you had to go.
I think that's their budget. It wasn't that their budget 137 million.
Yeah, I think that's
I
that's
might have
their
been
lifetime budget.
Yeah.
That's what okay. Okay.
I have
That guy's
to say,
not that good.
Well, no, I mean, this is what happens when you try to get past the paywall, and you can't necessarily vouch for the accuracy of the article at that point.
Go ahead, Nance. Nance, go.
I just want to say this story has fascinated me all week since it broke a few days ago into, from the Mackinac conference. First, I mean, I can see embezzling 40,000, 400,000, even 4 million, but 40 million? How does that happen? How does that happen?
Well,
and now the guy's in the wind?
The old-fashioned way. They steal it.
No, but in all seriousness, I felt the exact same way, Nance. Almost exactly what you just said. And the second question is, if in fact he did it, where's the money?
Well, he's in the wind now. Did you see that story?
A lot of guys sticks up a bank, he can go in the wind, but there's still, where's the money?
I don't know. I mean,
I guess $40 million. I have a guess.
Caymans.
It's offshore, right?
Yeah, it's in the Caymans or somewhere, and he's probably in a country with a excellent electronic banking system and no extradition treaty with the United States.
Those are the non-extradition treaties are very few and far between. He is likely to be in a fairly unpleasant place.
Well,
but Bill,
maybe so, here, but he's so.
Well, Bill, where's the oversight? I mean, if I go into my wallet and I'm missing $5, I might be like, maybe I threw it in the collection plate or I tipped somebody. Actually, I'm a quarter Scottish, so if you're getting a $5 tip from me,
I was going to say I've been to lunch with you, ML. You didn't tip anybody that much.
Yeah, no. I try and get tips, like who's doing what. But you take $40 million, I'm going to notice that. I'm going to notice that right away.
Yeah.
Right.
That is a good, as Julie Johnson says, how in the hell are there no checks on this person's access to cash? That's a lot of money disappearing.
I am used to reading this story.
People sign. Pretty simple.
What was that?
I said in a lot of organizations, you have dual signing policy.
Right.
Exactly.
I don't know if the organization
says, hey, we're going on the Deadline Detroit Bahamas trip. And Nancy says, yeah, and they both sign it, and then they're gone, and we don't know where the hell they are. But at least there's checks.
Actually, ML, that trip's going to be to Zug. That trip's going to be to Zug Island, which is actually offshore, Bill. So I think we might find the money there.
I am used to this story being about a youth hockey league or a church or some kind of small organization. The perpetrator is inevitably kind of a dumpy-looking housewife who was the treasurer of the organization, and the money, it always ends up being spent on QVC bracelets, trips to Vegas, and other
Gambling.
really
Gambling.
sad things. Yeah, gambling, but more often QVC, because who hasn't watched QVC and said that is a beautiful bracelet?
Nancy, that's so arcane. It's now Poshmark.
Oh, okay.
So
whatever, Poshmark. Yeah, I mean,
She's a veteran. Remember, she's a veteran. So.
Alan, let's go to our last segment.
All right, we're just
downtown Detroit. Robert Wells, Schmuck of the week.
Now, ML, you have been just aching to repeat who's your Schmuck of the week. You've already passed the spoiler alert, so go for it.
No, all I want to say is, you know what former CEO of the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy has said to the U.S. attorney?
Yeah.
Keep my name out your motherfucking mouth.
Laughter.
And your bill of indictment.
So you're
right.
saying that that's actually Chris Rock who's in that position? But, okay, got it. All right, Barb.
I am going to go with the Detroit police who went to Wayne State yesterday morning, very early, and broke up, from all accounts, pretty violently, their Palestinian encampment. Tear gas and hitting people with sticks is something that raises my hackles, and there was no reason for it. It was a peaceful gathering, and I don't understand. And they did it anyway, and I think there's going to be a lot of suits come up. There's people that have been pretty badly hurt, and shame on them, shame on them, shame on them. We learned nothing from the 60s. Sorry.
I'm shocked that this happened at Wayne State. I mean, that it happened at Yale or even U of M. No, but I mean, Wayne State has half the student body is Arab American there. And the idea that the encampment was what, 2 days, 3 days? I mean,
it was a little longer than that, but it was because no one heard about it, because it was just a peaceful gathering of people, pitching tents.
Yeah, they're just hanging out.
And it was after the regular academic term was done. I mean, it was
right.
Steve,
you know what surprised me yesterday? There was a panel on Mackinac with university presidents, and the new president of Wayne State was there on Mackinac Island.
Huh.
How are you not on campus until this is resolved? That's the kind of thing where you cancel that trip.
Because they had free vodka.
There's going to be any consequences from that, but I was blown away.
Huh.
It might be the time where the president wants to go talk to the students. But
it would be
overly optimistic.
Ready?
Steve.
My schmuck of the week is Senator J.D. Vance. It was bad enough that all of the Republican toadies went on television and went in the papers and defended Trump and this and that and the other. But J.D. Vance, a man who, by the way, went to Yale to law school. So we're not talking about a guy who doesn't know about the law. He said, according to what I read on the TV in the gym looking across, he said that this stuff here should be decided at the ballot box. You see, not in court, which moved me to want to ask J.D. Vance. So if you get hit over the head and stuck up out in the street by a guy with a pistol, we think we should call a vote about that, or should we go to the criminal court maybe and charge the guy with armed robbery?
Acquit him.
So to me, that statement, it put him high above the rest of the toadies when he said something like that. And that's the question that I would have asked him if I were the CNN person that was talking to him at the time.
If there was subtitles, if you had closed captioning subtitles that they sometimes have, when somebody's speaking in a foreign language, it should have said, "Pick me to be your vice president."
Exactly.
Well, he's literally on right now.
Voters of what they need to know before they go to the ballot box.
Right.
And that's really what it's about, is uninformed voters.
Well,
who also
he's
like
speaking to Wolf right now. He's speaking to Wolf Blitzer right now, and it really is a job talk for the VP spot. And he says this is just a paperwork violation. So there you go with the hillbilly elegy guy.
Bill, you know what that completely misses. I've got to go off this because nobody's talked about this. It misses the fact that because it was it was listed as an attorney fee. He got a full deduction for this. Seriously, you got a full deduction for a porn star to cover a payment of a porn star. I mean, we ended up paying for some of this because it reduced his tax rate. It reduced his taxes by 100% of it. It's ridiculous to me that nobody even raises the issue that this is also tax evasion. But
it's like the outrage. It's the outrage bill that I had when Jerry Springer used a negotiable instrument to transact with a prostitute.
And when you want to talk about billable hours, it turns out Stormy Daniels got 130 grand for 6 minutes work.
in a de minimis effort at that,
Wow, that's serious money by the hour.
Yeah.
Bill, who's your
schmucks that I can list? I mean, I do think one has to consider giving it to Donald. I know it was initially named after him, but we ought to consider that. Mine was Rick Scott, Senator Scott, Tim Scott, for the same reason that who listed him as their schmuck. Steve listed Vance.
Yep.
Reason.
Yeah.
This guy had some credibility in my mind when he first got elected. He has done everything, and he's gone lower than kissing the ring, or depending on where the ring is, higher than kissing the ring. He has just lost all credibility he has ever had in my book, and I wouldn't vote for him for dog catcher.
All right, Joel.
Okay, mine is it's going to be Ben Affleck. They're driving me insane. Every time I read the paper, I read about Ben's lost his mind and he's come over and his fever is now broken, and they will be divorcing. And Ben Affleck drives me nuts. I mean, this seems to be his thing. But this Bennifer breakup and the news, I hate it. But I love to hate it. And so he's my schmuck of the week, but also one of my favorite people. So that's where I'm going to go. It's going to be Ben Affleck.
I love that. I love that meme of him smoking outside his house. Just like, with that look on his face, like, oh my god,
what's happened to us? Let us become.
Joel, have you noticed since David Pecker was on the stand, the only coverage on those newspapers has been Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez and a little bit of Catherine Ferguson, but American politics have been completely wiped from the grocery aisle.
There you go.
Legitimate news.
Not completely.
That's my schmucks line, but
Okay.
I love them.
There you go.
Nancy.
Oh, it was such a long list today, and you guys, we've covered almost all of it, but I think I need to go with Samuel Alito, henpecked husband, who in refusing to recuse himself from the January 6th cases after the flag stories that have come out over the last couple of weeks, he said it was his wife is the one who flew the flags, not him. And then he gave this deathless statement, which I think coming from the author of the Dobbs decision is just some pretty strong cheese here. She makes her own decisions, and I have always respected her right to do so. So there we go. It's like
I've got something to add to that, Nancy. That Nell Scoville writes in the Daily Beast. While he has control over every woman's baby-making uterus, he does not have control over his wife's flag-lowering arms.
So true.
And I don't know if any of you, did you see the New York Times story that dove deeper into the neighbor dispute that led to supposedly the upside-down flag? And one of my Facebook friend said, if you ever called Martha Ann Alito the C word, come and sit by me. So there you go.
Well, I would pay close attention to see if Alito has any decisions from SCOTUS that come out on Friday, June the 14th, because that would really be a slap. That is, of course, Flag Day.
It is.
So, Allan.
I'm going to go with Judge John Roberts, who's really overseeing a rogue court. I mean, he needs to get control over that court. He's the chief judge. I mean, he has some limited control, but he has enough that he should be putting his foot down and not allowing the court to crumble in terms of credibility. So.
He really is.
Cool. All right. Well, I've got a couple of schmucks. One is Michael Cohen, who went from putz to pundit on cable news in less than 2 hours to basically have a Shaw Schmuck redemption. But but the one that the other one would be Hilary Clinton, in whose new book she blames women for her 2016 election defeat.
Right.
But really, the schmuck of the week is Justin Lepelles, who is the lead plaintiff on a class action lawsuit against Michigan's own Madonna for apparently subjecting him and the audience to be forced to watch simulated sex acts in the heat, since Madonna went ahead and ordered the air conditioning to be shut at her LA stop on the Celebrations tour. It also started 90 minutes late, so everybody was having to bake. And by the way, Justin Lepelles is not her boyfriend. But apparently it was alleged that she was lip syncing through the whole show, and they are suing for both negligence and intentional infliction of emotional distress, as well as physical harm, where some people felt that they were going to have a heat stroke. So Justin Lepelles apparently is not burning up for her love, but bringing a lawsuit to which we've all been subjected to late starting shows. I remember seeing the Butthole Surfers Club in New York starting at 1:30 in the morning, and I'm okay, but yeah, a little bit. I'm sure, Bill.
Before you leave, we didn't talk about what's going on in the Middle East at all, but something should be said about what's happening in Rafah and what's going on there, the bombing of that camp. It can't be left unsaid that this cannot continue. It will, but it cannot. It should not. They have completely, in my opinion, delegitimized the Israeli government. And I had to say something. And that shall go by.
And I mean, I think that reflects by now, I think there's 145 countries that recognize the Palestinian state. It went up by about 6 within the last week. So absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for another boring show with nothing to talk about. Thank you, FL Elrick. Thank you, Steve Fishman. Thank you, Joel Sklar. Thank you, Bill Seikaly. Thank you, Barb Ingalls. Thank you, Nancy Derringer. Sorry, not trying to sound like Trump there. And thank you, or Ben Affleck for that matter. And thank you, Allan Lengel, with the last word.
Drive home safely.
Have a